Hello everyone. We are going to look today to natural language to a concept of natural language processing uh, for using Gen AI for database operations. So for this example, we are taking this Chinook database, which has artist album, track records, media types, etc. And from the other side, we would have the employee, customer, and invoicing details for these tracks as you see on the screen. So let's start with a small example. We say, okay, ask me about your data, give me all the album names. And now this should convert using the GenAI, the SQL, and also run the SQL, and then it should get me that information out, right? And I could also go complex and give me all the album names for which there is at least one outstanding invoice, and I submit it, and it should be able to generate the queries with which it should be able to return me this information, even if it needs multiple joins, right? So okay, it says, okay, these are the albums where there is at least outstanding invoices that you see. All right, now what I want to do is I also want to make sure that um, I cannot delete information or insert new one. So I change it via prompt. So insert album information, insert new album titled um, Play Me Auth, whatever, right? And when I try to do this, I assume it'll fail and it'll say I cannot do it, right? This is possible very simply via the prompt. So let's go to the code. I'm using this server.js, and we find our prompt. And in the prompt, I would have said um, only if a SQL generated does not change the database, else return you cannot do it. And that's why the response saying I cannot do it, right? Now let's make this example a little more complex. I want to have two users who have different kinds of database accesses and still then go via this application to handle the authorization. So what I do is, let me kill this terminal. I have another application where I start having my users. So I say I have a user called Ellis, I have a user called Bob. Ellis having album and artist access and tables, and then Bob has invoice and customer. And now what I do is that I authenticate the query against what the user really has. So within the query, I would always try to authenticate and find out if the answer also, or the query has to be invoked at all or not to start with first, right? So that is what I do. So let me make some changes. I will take and change my HTML, and I'll take you through it what I'm doing. So the previous HTML is commented. What I do is start with a login section, and I just, as of now, keep it frugal. I say I just want the username to be entered, and in my script that I am using, I would comment the previous script out, and then I would have the auth token obviously also implemented to keep the session per user alive for a certain duration of time. I use the JWT for it. And so I would have please log in first. If the auth token is not available, else then I go to query. And in the query, as I mentioned, I would now then have authentication against the table that has happened. And the query overall still stays the same, right? For the prompt, overall still stays the same. And then if you say I try to match the SQL query from a user perspective to which table it has, and if I see that the table is not matching in the allowed tables construct, then I just give an error. This is just another implementation, frugal implementation of authorization concept. Let's see how it goes. So I will then start the node for server auth, and I assume it should give me a login page, and I say Alice, and I login successful, and I would say again say get me all album names starting with A, and I would submit. Let's also check that you see it creates a SQL, and then you see I have the access of authorization table, and of course I get the information. And just for us to remember, Alice had album and artist. Now I try to bring in invoice, so I would say again, first let's make a simple one. Get me outstanding invoices, and I submit. And I assume it should tell me that it cannot do unauthorized access to the table, but also let me try to go around it and say, okay, give me all album names starting with A for which there are outstanding invoices, just to make it a little more complicated. And I submit. And even now, I think what it should try and tell me is that I don't have access. And I think that's the same answer. I don't have access